and you have that 25 seconds of silence, that's pain. That you are actually feeling pain. You're looking at the pain in his eyes. And it goes back to him being dragged back in to this life that he fought so hard to protect his children from. But yet, again, it's cost him his family in the worst possible way. Kay, a divorce, that's fine. She's still living. She's living her own life. She's alive for her children. The daughter is dead. One of the children that is supposed to carry the family name has died. And it's a whole nother ballgame for that feeling.
Although I must say, again, Sofia Coppola's performance takes me out of it because she's like, "Dad."
Agreed.
I'm like, this is tied with Marion Cotillard's death in The Dark Knight Rises. It's like one of the most ridiculous like final lines and deaths in a film. So again, you have this amazing piece of art, and you just like throw a random splotch of paint in the center of it, and that is her performance, and especially this scene.
But that's just it, Zach. It's a splotch of paint. I hated the scene for years because I only seen the movie a handful of times, and that's the one scene everybody goes back to, is when she gets shot, and everybody complains. Dad, and that's the last thing you hear of her. Some people clap at it, other people cry, whatever the case may be. But taking that out of the equation, Zach, that scene alone is heart-wrenching. I'm with Brandon, it's heart-wrenching. I can look past the Sofia Coppola just for that 25 seconds to minute and a half, we'll say, because everybody else feels the pain and cries along with him. But it's an absolutely heart-wrenching scene.
Yeah, the Pacino performance does it, and it's interesting to see a Godfather film obviously way later. This is post Scarface. This is Pacino has done other things, right? You see more of the Al Pacino we all know from like pop culture in this film, more so than in the previous two. But he's not a character of himself at this point. He's still given an A+ performance, and I'm shocked that we got all this way through. You kind of mentioned it earlier. I mean, just briefly, but like nobody said. Just when I thought I was out, they pulled me back in. That has to, that's from Godfather 3, and that's probably right up there with all the quotable lines in the first two movies. So this one does, for all of its faults, it does have the iconography and the quotability of the other ones as well. I'll give it that.
I don't know. I can't wait to hear your ratings, especially after this discussion, guys. Before we get to our ratings, though, did you have any other final thoughts on the film? Chris, we'll start with you. Is there anything else you wanted to add that we haven't hit on yet?
A couple things hit me. Final thoughts. There's the cliche, history repeats itself. That's one thing that's definitely apparent in this to be a closure type of movie. History does repeat itself. The overall theme of redemption and absolution for Michael to finally become as pure as he once was before he took over the mantle of the family. And then there's the reboot before reboots. If you look at this movie not as a continuation, but just as a standalone, you can see a lot of Godfather 1 and 2 in this movie. And I say reboot before reboots because much like we see in TV and in film, you may get a couple of the main stars in just to jumpstart the movie. And they come out, and now the main character comes in. One series that comes to mind with this was the TV show Heroes. When Heroes first aired, it had its run. Years later, they tried to reboot it, so they brought one of the characters back to try to reboot it, to give it its fame again, and it fizzled. And I think with these two phrases, is what the fans are looking for and what the fans debate about. And to butcher a title of a Star Trek TOS, I'm going to say, and the viewers shall choose. Because that's basically what it is. It's really up to the viewer. Everybody thinks, conceptualizes everything in its own sight, in their own sight. But when they hear preconceptions, they're already going in with such preconceptions.
Interesting callback to Heroes there, Chris. I was a faithful watcher. I went all through the fourth season. I was very excited for Heroes Reborn. I got about halfway through it and just stopped because it was boring and not very good. So, so yes, this would be the Godfather 3 would be the Heroes Reborn if this were Heroes. But,
oh my goodness.
But I hear what you're saying, Chris, because it is kind of a requel, like a remake sequel, kind of like The Force Awakens or Creed for Rocky. You know, it has the same kind of beats as the first movies, but it's kind of carrying on from that with new characters, with the original new characters, and now the older guard and whatnot. So yeah, a legacy sequel, if you will. This is one of the best, I will say, years later sequels. You know, when there's like there's like a franchise and then a big break, and they finally like, hey, you know what? Let's make another one of those. And those are very hit or miss, but I will say that for this, it is good. And yeah, those are really my final thoughts. I've said all I need to on it now. I don't think it's as bad as people say, but I don't think it's as good as people like Brandon say.
Well, my final thoughts. The first question I got to ask is, what's up with oranges? Like,
Death
somebody's
and
always
oranges,
dying
yes.
with an orange. Like, got in the first one, you know, and then that Don with the white suit in the second one had the oranges, and then, you know, I don't know, then he dies at the end and he drops an orange in the end of Godfather 3. What's up with oranges and death? What does Coppola have against orange juice? Oranges and orange juice, I don't know.
This is why I don't eat oranges right there.
I don't know. I love this movie. I think it's really great. I don't have anything else really to add. I mean, there's a bunch of stuff that we haven't touched on. I'm sure we could talk for another hour, but I don't know. I think people are way too hard on this film. Like, fine, you don't like Sofia Coppola in this movie. You don't like the incest storyline. Okay, fine. They acknowledge it throughout the whole thing. They're sitting there, like, people fall in love. I don't know, like, that's just how I take it. People fall in love. You don't control who you fall in love with. She fell in love with her cousin. They're acknowledging it the whole time.
Yeah, but they
didn't
even sell that love story at all.
Sure. Yes, it's not the best love story it is. This is not Titanic, okay?
Which is also not that great a love story, but that's a conversation for another time.
Or Ghost.
We'll do that when we get to Titanic 2 and 3.
Ghost, there. Yes, the cinematic mark for love stories, Ghost. Well said, Chris. But,
Ghost, okay.
But, so, all that being said, how many cannolis out of 5, Chris, would you give Godfather Part 3?
If you'd asked me before I saw this movie again, I would have told you a crumb. Or even the powdered sugar on top of one. But if I had to give it one, noting what we've talked about, I would actually raise the crumb, and I would say 3 whole cannolis.
Nice.
Okay.
That makes me happy.
Well, Brandon, I'm also going to make you happy because I, too, would give it 3 out of 5 cannolis. This movie
I'm
is...
disappointed in you, Zach.
Can't win with this guy. Can't win with this guy. So, I mean, yes, there are big problems with this film, but that's what keeps it from being a 5 out of 5 like the others, really. I mean, its greatest crime, other than Sofia Coppola's performance, is not being as great as Godfather Part 1 and 2. That's really its greatest crime. And
right.
It's how can you get 3 for 3? How many franchises are, right? So 3 out of 5
Children
for
of
me.
the Corn 4, but, you know, like, okay. Like, I agree, and I've said that. I'm like, I don't know. This is 5 out of 5 for me. I love this movie. I think it's great. And I've said this countless times. Is it as good as The Godfather? No, it's not. Is it as good as The Godfather 2? No, it's not. And that's it. Its greatest crime is that it's not as good as the first 2. And people are way too hard on this film. But I still think, like, if this was on its own, I still think that this is a 5-star film. If this was the only Godfather movie we ever saw and we didn't know the book, I think this was a 5-star film on its own. And I love it, and I will defend it. I guess I don't care if people don't like it. I've said my piece in this movie, and I'm so glad we talked about it. And I'm glad that you guys acknowledge that there is some great stuff. I'm a little disappointed with the 3, but I guess that's better than halfway. If you were going to give it a crumb, that's better than 2.5. So
you guys can help me out here. On our offer you can't refuse count, I don't recall or didn't note any offers you can't refuse made in this movie in dialogue.
I didn't hear any.
So we leave the Godfather trilogy stuck at 5. 4 from the first one, one from the second one. I guess it might have been more of a veto thing, and there's no veto in this movie, so that might have been it. They could have said it somewhere. They're like, I love the little callbacks, like when he's at the Vatican, they're like, it's nothing personal, it's just business. So, like them telling Michael that, right?
That's,
little lines.
that's
like
another
that.
line I had. There's so many quotable lines. You know, you talked about it, Zach, already. There's so many quotable lines in this movie. Maybe just as many as the total as there are in both The Godfather 1 and 2. But, and I know the question you're going to ask, Zach, and I'll just wait for you to ask it. Go ahead.
Well, Chris, is this franchise fatigued?
Yes. I believe at this point it is, and I'll tell you why.
Tell us why.
I think they waited too long for this movie to be made. I'm going to say this because I think 25 years from the second one, because this was made in early 90s.
Well, this was
Godfather
Part 2 was 1974, Godfather Part 3 was 1990, so 26 years between releases.
Yeah, it's way too far.
16 years, not 26, 16.
No.
74 plus 6 is 80, plus 10 is 90. 16 years.
I'll see myself out. I can't do math. I'm sorry. I got confused. No, that's the third. I got confused with the actual. See, the chronology of the movies. It's 25 years
Correct.
after, give or take.
I think
right.
it was way too long. I think they should have done it if they were going to make a blockbuster. They should have done it earlier. If they were going to keep the fans interested, they should have done it earlier.
16 years. What is it? See, what is it with 16 years? Same distance between Return of the Jedi and The Phantom Menace, and that turned out just fine. But that's an interesting point, Chris. I hadn't really thought about that because I like how it's about the next generation of Corleones, and you want them to be a certain age, like all the children and the cousins, and to have new characters who can be in the business, so to speak. You kind of have to have it set a certain amount of time afterward, and all the parallels go back. You know, if Michael is an elder statesman of the family, much like his father was in the first one, the time gap helps. But I guess what you're saying is they could have aged the people up, right? But just released it sooner.
Correct.
Gotcha. Well, as for me, I mean, it is fatigued because if this truly is Michael,
you just told me you wanted to see Godfather 4 not 20 minutes ago.
Can I continue? Can I continue with my thought? Brandon, thank you very much. It is fatigue because if it is Michael's story, right? He's dead. He's dead, right? But as I would have continued to say before being so rudely interrupted by my co-host, there is an interest because what did I keep saying? The worst part about this film is Sofia Coppola's Mary, and if they made a 4, she wouldn't be in it. So. So that intrigues me about a Godfather Part 4. But we can always go watch Ocean's 11 or another movie like that with Andy Garcia. By the way, if no one has seen Let's Be Cops, that is one of my favorite comedies in recent years, and Andy Garcia's in it. I don't know why he's in this movie. Maybe he's just a fan of the new girl because the leads in that movie star in that TV show. But that is a hilarious movie. It's actually a pretty smart comedy. It's about two guys who dress up as cops for Halloween and they decide to start being cops, but they're not really cops, and the comedy comes from that. Anyway, Andy Garcia's in it again as a shady criminal dude, which he established here. That's an underrated Andy Garcia performance in a movie that a lot of you listeners might not have checked out. But if you want some good laughs, check out Let's Be Cops, featuring Andy Garcia in a supporting role.
Okay, you guys ready? You guys ready for my answer?
Yes, Brandon. Is this franchise fatigued?
Yes, it is.
No.
Okay.
You just told me.
Think.
Blah, blah, blah.
You just defended the movie, for Christ's sake.
5-star.
I think
five-star film from this guy. No, I don't want to see anymore.
I don't. Why? Because this is a perfect trilogy. Michael is dead. This is the story of Michael Corleone, okay? That's what this is. This is not the story of the next generation. This is the story of him, and they've killed him off. I don't want to see another Godfather film. I think that this is the perfect conclusion to this series of films. And while it's a tragic ending and it's sad to see him die alone, I think it's perfect for the story that they told. And anything else would then take away for the mastery of these 3 films.
I agree with you, Brandon, for that same exact reason. That was going to be my B-side, but I forgot about it. Michael Corleone is dead.
So,
end of story. Michael Corleone was the trilogy. Done. We don't need to see Andy Garcia